All right. Hi, everyone. I've got an awesome group of reflectors here. We're going to help you understand a little more about what it means to be a reflector. And obviously, as you can gather from if you've listened to any other conversations, this is just so that you can learn about this in real examples, real life. I hope that it helps you understand yourself a little better, but also if you have reflector clients, that it helps you understand your clients better as well. So let's jump into some introductions. Jason, you're first on my screen. And did you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Jason Monroe. I've been in my experiment a little over a year, was introduced to human design last year. I went all in, had a lot of life transformation. I am a 6-2 reflector, and this is actually a little fun. Annie and I have very, very similar charts. We weren't born too far apart from each other. So that will be kind of fun to chat through. But after a lot of transformation, I've decided that human design is the place I need to be. I just recently finished level 4 certification in the quantum human design with Karen Curry Parker and started a life purpose in HD coaching business with a projector partner. So her and I do team coaching and readings for people and kind of just found my thing. So prior to this, I was a library director, a web developer, a whole nother life. And human design has put me on a new course. I live in Rock Springs, Wyoming, of all places. Little
Awesome.
quaint town out in Wyoming.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jason. Jocelyn, did you want to go next?
Sure, thanks. My name is Jocelyn. I am originally from Detroit. I live in Phoenix right now. I'm a 4-1 quad right reflector. And I was introduced to human design the very first time around 2017 or 2018. And then it made its way back around to me in 2021 or something like that. I'm kind of, I don't know if I could consider myself fully in the experiment, but I do, I am human design informed extremely. I have created a method actually between astrology and human design. So I kind of have my own synthesis and my own method going. I have a membership and a mastermind that's basically helping people recognize their patterns and systemize them, live their best life with that. Right now, we're focusing on emerging entrepreneurs and visionaries and things like that. And yeah, it's been very interesting to say the least to be aware that I'm a reflector, or be aware that I'm forward, or be aware that I'm what right, because a lot of the experiences that I have are I feel like they're almost inexplicable without this kind of vocabulary, this kind of language, this kind of articulation. So it's been really wonderful to work with human design and also be in contact with people who work with human design.
That's awesome. Annie, did you want to go next?
I'm Annie. I'm a 5-1 reflector. I've got the left angle cross of distraction. I'm coming to you from not so sunny at the moment because it's very early in the morning, Brisbane, Australia. I've been in my experiment for this is coming on my 6th year, but all in, I would probably say 5 years. So that first year was very much a heady process. So yeah, it's a journey. I'm glad we're going to get into it. Down here in Australia, I work as a counsellor. I work with women through birth, pregnancy, and postpartum. So I found that leaning on my reflector strengths has really kind of like slowed me down and allowed me to not take on as much as I have in the past. So it's also put me in a really, really good place to be able to be there for people and see people a little bit more clearly and just allow myself to serve in that environment. So yeah, it's been a beautiful gift so far. Challenging, but a beautiful gift.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks.
you. Donna?
Hello, I'm Donna Lee Gastrick, and I am a 4-6 reflector with the right angle cross of consciousness 4. And I have been in this experiment knowingly as a reflector since late 2019. So for a solid 4 years. And I've aligned with it more and more each and every year. I can't say enough about the energies that are coming onto the planet right now helping us. And I align with those energies and help leaders to hone their purpose and their contribution, specifically how it pertains to collective well being and through their service and leadership. So it's all about really up-leveling leadership skills, which we all are doing in ourselves anyway, but really bringing the pathway of the gene keys into the energies that we work on each and every month. And it's really a powerful, dynamic living experience as we shift from mind-based beings into fully streaming and living this life force energy as it moves through us. So I'm super excited to be here and collaborate with other reflectors and sharing this journey. And I hope to learn immensely as I do as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Brittany.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. My name is Brittany. I am a 5-1 reflector with a left angle crossover refinement. I've been aware of human design probably for a couple years now, but it's really been the last year that I've really been trying to like live by my design and learn more about it. I've always known that I was more of a sensitive person and in my family, and I think that was misunderstood for so many years. And so I always saw my sensitivity as a weakness. And so now I'm trying to see that as a strength. I am a wife to a generator and a mom to 2 manifesting generator daughters. So living in that environment is very interesting and learning my design as well as theirs and how that like works as a family. My background is I went to school to be a therapist and I have now transitioned out of the therapy, like the clinical world, and I'm wanting to get more into coaching, working with hypersensitive women, moms specifically who are overwhelmed, burnt out, that type of thing, learning to see their sensitivity as a strength, working with grief and trauma and birth trauma and that kind of stuff. So it's been very eye opening, that journey of like deconditioning myself from so many years of living in a completely different world and the people around me. So yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation and to connect with other reflectors because, to be honest, I don't know a lot of them.
Thank you so much. My first question that I don't think I had on the question list is when you first discovered you were a reflector and you read it, was there a part of you that was like, no, that's not me? Or was it like, oh my gosh, that is me and I feel so seen? What was your experience? Yeah, go ahead, Donna.
I I had an aha, like, oh, I get it. That's why. And it was really an understanding why some people don't accept me. Knowing that reflectors have this aura that's like Teflon. And if they see themselves and they don't like what they're seeing, that can sometimes come across like I did it. And it really gave me permission to, be more sensitive to those moments when I was with people. And I still to this day trigger my dad. And he thinks I'm doing something. And it's honestly happened where as I can ask him to reflect on when he felt that trigger inside, what I was really saying, he realizes I said nothing. And it gives him the opportunity. I get to be the mirror for him to look within. And it's really helped heal parts of our relationship. So to me, it was an aha. Thank you. I get it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anyone else?
I also, very similar for me. It was just, it was less of an aha and it's like, oh, finally. Because, at that point, I had already been calling myself a mirror because my experiences were just so particular and so consistent as far as people perceiving me in a very particular way. And I'm like, that's not me at all. And I realized like they're seeing a part of themselves that I see, but I don't think they realize it's them and they're attaching me to it. So it was my very first exposure, even though I didn't get all the way into it at that time. I had a whole bunch of like paywalls and it just turned me off. So I just, I moved on. But I had a passage that I screenshot and I was just like, this is me to a T. Uh, I had grown up always, I had this contrast, this vacillation between feeling like I was different, but kind of suppressing that feeling because I didn't want to walk around saying, oh, I'm special or I'm more this, more that. It was just, I would constantly search for things that I had in common with others. And it would be like, okay, I can relate to them. I can resonate with them to some degree, but the same, like, why is that? And like, at some point I was thinking, there are all types of things going around, like what reality actually is. And at some point I'm just like, is reality just like we're all one person essentially? And we're just like, is everyone else just like a projection? Is it actually just me? Am I dreaming? Am I awake? Like it was so much that like at some point I even feel like I went into kind of a sense of like psychosis because I couldn't understand. And so just like God was saying, it really gave me permission to like lean into what I was feeling in regards to my relationship with others, my relationship with the world, my relationship with reality. And it was just, I mean, it was like I literally could take off a shell and just be me. And of course, the first 2 years is super raw and sensitive. It's like, like, how do I do this? But the biggest word that Donna used that I resonate with is permission. And it was extremely replenishing.
Mm. Thank you so much for that. Jason, did you want to go?
In 2023, my entire life changed. Everything switched up all within 3 months. Marriage of 24 years ended. My mother died. My father moved away. My kid went through some massive things and ended up in rehab. I left a church. My job changed. And in the middle of all that, somebody introduced me to human design because I thought I was losing my identity and who I was and was asking all sorts of questions. And, the woman that read the chart, she was like, "Oh, you're a reflector." And she was giddy and dancing around. And I was dismissive and said, "Okay, that's silly. Never heard of this. Don't believe in it." She was so excited though. She's like, "I found a unicorn. I've never met a reflector." And she kept feeding me human design. Watch this video, learn more about it. I still didn't have anything to do with it. Then I went to Sedona, Arizona, visited an energy vortex during an eclipse, had this crazy spiritual experience with energy, came down off of the vortex. I've been able to sense and feel energy ever since. And I went all in with human design. And it has explained everything why I've never been able to connect with people, while I've always felt out of place in environments. I used to go to certain places and everything felt off and I couldn't tell why it was off. And so human design basically said, "You're okay being you." It was the thing that told me I'm not crazy and that I'm just a reflector. And so I've identified with it very strongly. And when I introduced my partner to it, she also was like, "Oh my God, this explains my entire life and why I have felt the way I've felt." So both of us are huge advocates of human design because of this. And for me, when you say, what was that first experience like? It was first dismissive, but then it was all embracing and realizing it explained everything. So as I run my life backwards now, I can almost hardly believe some of the jobs I did, although I did bounce around in all these careers. I mean, as you all know, these open centers are great, right? You hop onto everybody else's train. My ex, wonderful human, reads more books than anyone I know. My career, librarian. So was that my passion or hers? I'm still asking myself that question. But I can explain my entire life through this reflectorness. I was raised in a family of all generators. It makes sense now why I couldn't connect with my parents, my siblings. I mean, it really provided a lot of answers. So I was surprised that I'd never heard about it. It's been around forever. And here I am like in the 2000s and I'm like, oh my God, this has been around since the 90s. So why did no one introduce this to me? So it really helped me understand who I was.
Oh, thank you for that. It's funny. My brother is a reflector, a 3-5 reflector, except he's like not into any of this. He's very certain, like very rigid almost. If I even bring anything up that challenges his like scientific knowledge, I guess, he's just like, no, I'm not going to take it in. But it's funny. He was dating somebody and she loved going to EDM, like type of thing.
Yes.
And this guy, I see that he's like wearing, like going to these EDM concerts and wearing these outfits and like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this side of you. But it's funny because they were together for 4 years and now they've separated. And I'm just like, is he still going to do this? But yeah, he just became like this version that I've never could envision him to be. So it's funny that you said that. It's like, well, is it actually him or is it just the conditioning of who he was living with for a long time?
Oh, it's heavy. You want to talk rock climbing? I don't climb rocks. My 22-year-old son does. He climbs aggressively, big, like you've seen these movies, he's been up El Capitan, he's been Free Solo, like he's the Yosemite climber guy. I can talk this all day with you. I'll tell you about the BA boulders and I'll talk about the top climbing spots. I've never been on the rocks, but I went all in with this kid and like I found myself knowing way more than I needed to know. And I attribute it to that openness, that G center just pulls it all in.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Anyone else? Yeah, Brittany.
I was gonna say, I don't feel like it was necessarily like a huge aha moment for me, but it was more of like, okay, this fits, this makes sense. And like the other lady said, like, this gives me permission to really be who I am and who I feel like deep down I've always known, but I've been scared to recognize it, I guess. And I've always been someone that's loved like personality, like Myers Briggs and Enneagram and like stuff like that, trying to figure out like who I am and the core of like my identity. But human design was the first one that was like, this really resonates. Like, this really makes sense because with the other ones, I was like, I could be this or I could be that. But this was the one that I was like, okay, this is me. There's no question about it. Like, I know this like in my bones. And I think over the years too, like not understanding and not having anything to really like pinpoint like how to describe how I felt like my entire life, that it was almost like a sense of like coming home to myself in a way. And for so long as a kid, like not understanding the sensitivity or the way that I could relate or connect with other people, that sorry, I like lost my train of thought there and the thought is gone. Oh, that I feel like sometimes I would always get so lost in everybody else's stuff that like I didn't know where someone ended and I began. And this has helped me understand like when I feel that way and how to figure out like where I am and what's mine and what somebody else is.
Mm. Yeah. Annie, did you want to go?
Yeah. For me, I went on a 3 days of emotional, I lost it for about 3 days. I cried, I laughed, I kept looking at it. It was one of those biggest moments of my life, to be honest, of just it meant like what everyone said. I felt like I came home to myself. I felt like I was like, what is this? What is this thing? Because it was a full body reaction to what I was seeing and what I was experiencing. And in those 3 days, it's like I quickly took myself back to parts of myself that I made sense, in these 3 days, it's like I traversed time and space of my lived experience to that point. And then, realizing that my father was also a reflector. So running all my kids' charts, running my family's charts. So it was it hit me. It was a 3 day, I call it a 3 day bender. And it was full of, full of crying, full of laughing, couldn't get my eyes off looking at this chart on my phone. So
Mhm.
it was more than an aha for me, but then I calmed down and sort of went through it. But yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I want to understand the experience a little more. Like when you were going through life, not knowing you were a reflector and you were in, let's say, certain environments, what was it? What did that feel like? I don't know if that's the right question. Like what was your experience like being sensitive with the open centers and taking it all in? Yeah, Jason.
Okay, so I have a really great example of this. I spent time in the same church for 47 years. And I used to get up and go to this church every morning, and I would go home more pissed off than when I started. And I was so angry. Nothing felt right. Everything was off. I didn't have human design to explain that to me. So I would beat myself up and I would be like, why do I feel so awful going to this church? It's kumbaya. The family's there. People are nice. Something didn't feel right in that whole environment. And then I had the same experience. I worked as a librarian, as a director for many years, well, 13. And I would go to work and it just started feeling off again. And I was be like, I have to leave this job. I do not know why, but so it's this feeling of unease. And human design has helped me understand what the unease was, the feeling of the environment, knowing things were off. And after I stepped out of this congregation and this church in particular, things came to light about the congregation, how it was dysfunctional and there were things happening behind the scenes that I didn't even know about. And I was like, oh my God, like I was literally picking up on that every Sunday, but not knowing how to express it or articulate it. So I don't know how it is for everyone else, but it is a general unease. I can walk into a space now and now being a reflector. And I also did a lot of coaching. I saw we were going to talk maybe deconditioning, but I worked with a reflector coach, and he taught me really how to be sensitive to these environments and how you can walk into spaces. And I maybe even talked to Annie about this early on. I was like, what happens when you walk into a bar? She's like, oh, you'll be good for a few minutes, but you'll eventually pick up whether you need to be there or not. And it becomes so true of all sorts of environments. And the coach really taught me how to funnel energy and not hold it, and how to let it pass through. But without any of that awareness, it would build up, and then you'd look through it through the vocabulary and understanding you had, which usually meant there's something wrong with me. How do I fix it? Why am I not experiencing life the way everyone else is? So I describe it as just a whole lot of unease in being in those environmental spaces. And so that's what it felt like prior to knowing I was a reflector, just a whole lot of discomfort in everything I would do. Now, likewise, I could also know when something was right. I'd go and interview for a job, and as soon as I walked into the library building, I was like, this is the place. If they offer me the job, I will take it. And it was my very first library job. I'm sitting there at this lunch table and they're all talking, and I just knew they were going to offer me the job. And I knew those were the people I needed to be around. Again, didn't have the reflector language, but I just knew that that was the place for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Anyone else?
Just would like to echo that as well, but also, Jazz, what you were saying about your brother, about how he picked up, this is the story of my life. It's like so many sports, so many hobbies, so many identities that I've picked up over time. And I hear that a lot from most of us. So it's a lived experience of just really taking on other people's needs, wants, and desires, I suppose, and sort of tapping into those. And then it's like, that's me. That's what I do now. And it's like, and then when you leave that space, it's like, oh, what was that? So it can be, there can be a bit of grief with that as well, because you do attach yourself to some of these identities. And then they kind of go, well, why can't I stick with that? What's wrong with me? So there's always been a little bit of that, constant coming and going in the past, I suppose. That's the lived experience from my angle. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that.
My lived experience echoes both Jason and Annie, in that I labeled it as sitting on the picket fence between pleasing the world and living up to the expectations and the conditioning of who they wanted me to be.
Mm.
While another side of me, or the other foot, was like, who am I? Let me be me. And why can't I just be me? And that polarity was just miserable until I really just cut loose from so much with the expectations. I'm going to raise my awareness to be socially aware to my impact on people, and soften my delivery of me in a way that maybe helps them increase their capacity to accept me in this now moment. But I also feel like we're living in these dynamic times of change where the whole world is circling around to meet us, support us, and lift us in all of these energies, because they're not just for us reflectors, they're for the entire population. And the more that we can hone these gifts and strength in us, and it is a strength to actually know what energy is yours and what's not. That's a gift and a strength. It's in the beginning, when you're not comfortable with it and when you misuse the energy, it can feel like a curse. It can feel like suffering because it's a lot to take on. But I feel like we live in such an amazing point in time. Like, we must have said yes and came for this with such gusto, that now it's time to really, hone our talent and our skills and contribution as well. And being all in to be you is what's coming forth. And thank goodness Pluto just came into Aquarius for now another 19 years. Like, we are so gifted with this energy of being our own unique self and giving permission for that. So no more picket fence for me. That picket fence was awfully uncomfortable. And it really feels like freedom to land on being me.
I love that. That was beautifully said. What has been the hardest thing to decondition being a reflector?
Uh, Judgment. Judgment. I feel like I was always told I had to have an opinion. I had an opinion. I mean, at an early age, my dad would walk in the room and ask me, who was sitting in a corner playing with Barbies, what my brothers were doing behind me. I'm not even looking at them. I don't know what they're doing. Well, they're fighting. But do I care? No, I'm playing with Barbies. But he wanted to know. And then in school, the teachers would call on me even when I didn't have my hand raised. It was like the world expected me to know.
Mm.
And for the longest time, I quit asking questions. And being a reflector, I ask a ton of questions. And now I let the answers come to me. Like it is the greatest gift ever. My questions have changed. My whole perspective on that is so different.
Thank you. Yeah, Brittany.
I feel like it's been a couple things for me. I think it's been the expectations of others. I feel like for so long, I lived my life by what I thought people expected of me and not necessarily what truly felt like my path. And so following, this perfectly planned path for so long. And because again, I thought that's what society expected of me. That's what I thought my parents expected of me and so on. And then I got to a point in my mid 20s where I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Because this does not feel good to me. And honestly, it was when I had when I became pregnant with my first daughter that I was like, something has to change because I do not want to continue feeling like this for the rest of my life and into my motherhood and for my children. And then I think as well, it has really not forced me, but it has pushed me into really trusting my intuition. I think for so long, I didn't understand what listening to my body and listening to my intuition meant and felt like. And I think for so long I ignored that, and my body was, like, slowly, like, trying to tell me, like, "This isn't right, like, this isn't for you, this isn't meant for you," but I just ignored that. And so now I'm really learning to trust that and to feel into that and pay attention, as well as patience. Patience has been a huge thing for me, and I think for so long, like, we live in a society where it's like, you want instant gratification, you need a decision now, you need to figure it out yesterday. And that doesn't feel good in my body, and so trying to honor that lunar, like, cycle and pay attention to that, and knowing that I feel better when I have the time to make the decision and feel really grounded in what I'm choosing to do and taking the time to get to that point to where it feels like this is a huge yes for me, or no, either way, but knowing that I'm confident in that decision.
Yes. Awesome. And I know that when that whole decision making and feeling rushed to make a decision, that can be where disappointment is experienced. Is that your experience as well? Yeah. I see nodding. Yeah. That disappointment. What is that well, first, I want to give everyone a chance. Is there anything anyone else wants to say about deconditioning? Like what was the hardest part of deconditioning? Yeah.
Well, I had a different experience with deconditioning. Like for me, and this is why I say I'm not sure if you would consider me in the experiment in the traditional sense, because for me, rather than feeling like I have to decondition, it's like the things that are conditioning me, I embrace as like indicators, indicators of my needs, indicators of whether an environment is good for me or not, whether a person is good for me or not, whether a decision is good for me or not. Like for example, if I don't have enough time in general, I'm not even gonna I don't even give it the space or the energy. I will, like, I know for a fact that this is just not a decision that I need to make. So if ultimately that means that I need to say no, or maybe next time, or, this is not for me, then that's what I do because I'm aware that considering my authority needs, like, I need to allow myself the repetition. Not necessarily the length of time, but the repetition so that I can see which way my body is leaning. And I don't have that in the situation. I know already that the impact is not. So it's like the things that before I felt like I needed to unlearn, now I feel like I use as a reference. Now I feel like I specifically know that for my body, it's like it's telling me something about myself, it's telling me something about what I need. And by the way, I'm just cross of doubt, so I'm a big. I don't always call myself a skeptic, but it is kind of that where just like Donna, I ask a lot of questions. I question everything, even before I found out I was a reflector. It was like in terms of my environments, it just made me ask questions. Oh, I'm going to baby here. I'm sorry. It just made me ask questions. I was just curious. I was just like, where am I going to get these answers? And I did find a lot of the time of answers my experience. It felt it hurt. Get me home. Okay.
The little voices.
She's my girl, my little 4-6 generator. Deconditioning, I feel like I have a much more freeing experience with deconditioning in general because instead of feeling like I have to break down certain pieces of myself that I had learned, I can just use those to inform me of what I need to do moving forward in any particular situation.
I love that. That's a really cool perspective. Anybody else on the deconditioning? Okay. So we talked a little bit about disappointment. What does disappointment feel like to you, and when does it show up the most? Go ahead, Jason. Yeah.
It shows up with expectations. So talking about deconditioning, that's been part of the things I've had to let go of. I had very type A. I mean, I managed a large library system, thought I had to do A, B, and C. But it's okay. So I've always been drawn to Buddhism and the teachings around that because that's non-attachment to things. I didn't realize how much that fit into being a reflector, not getting attached to outcomes. And when I worked with the reflector coach, that was the biggest thing he helped me with. He was like, if you want to set yourself up for discomfort, unease, disappointment, just go ahead and have an expectation. So this whole idea of living in surprise, you have to free yourself of everything, the outcome of any situation. So I've tried to go into this, but we live in a world that doesn't really allow for that, right? Like it was funny time somebody's like, set some goals, make a vision board. I was like, are you serious? Do you want me to set myself up for massive disappointment? That's the best way to do that. So maybe I'm floating too much like a butterfly, but I will tell you, I feel a lot happier now when I don't go into anything with any expectation. And I've approached this with everything, relationships, jobs, clients, conversations, even this thing. I literally just jump in. I'm like, don't know where it's gone. I'm not going to attach myself to any idea because the disappointment shows up with the expectations. And when I worked at the library, I saw a lot of people respond that way. And I wanted to poster on the walls, have it say, temper your expectations, because people walk into there and they would expect things to happen and they wouldn't happen the way they wanted it to. And then they'd get really mad. Well, all of us experience that, but I feel like for a reflector, it's like times 10, like it's 10x or 100x. I mean, it's just not minor disappointment. It's like life crushing sometimes. And I'm like, okay, this is why I'm not going to get attached anymore. Cause it's just not a little bit of like, oh, that's a bummer that didn't work out. No, I'm like devastated. I drive to a restaurant to find it's closed. The night's done. And I was like, why did I ever have the expectation and not the surprise that this could go any direction? So that's been some of the deconditioning too, is just to not attach to any outcome and to just let life unfold as it needs to and to get radically present with the now, because there's no expectations around the now. You're just in the moment. You're not worrying about the moment. But I don't know for the rest of you, but boy, that disappointment gets gut wrenching. It'll derail me a little.
It sounds like heartbreak. I don't know. Like when you talked about disappointment
Oh,
like that, does it?
that is
Does that
probably yeah,
is
that
that what
is,
it feels like for others?
It
I
can
think that's a good
feel
way to
very,
describe it.
it's also about other people and how they're feeling as well with disappointment. I find sometimes it's like exactly what Jason was saying about expectation. As soon as we set ourselves up for expectation, there's often a disappointment. But also, if we rush our process and we think we'd come to a decision, and then all of a sudden realizing that the decision, it's like a full body feeling of just, that pressure from both ends, mental and physical pressure, it all can come in and that can feel like that disappointment. So I love what you said there about heartbreak. Maybe it's also like body break as well. It's a feeling of dysresonance in the body and just goes, oh, you know. I find that a lot of disappointment comes from rushed decisions or rushed processes and things like that, where I haven't honored my decision making process time. Even if I don't have expectations, there still is, I think I've come to this. I think I'm feeling in alignment, but I haven't yet because I'm still trying to rush through it to kind of release that pressure of the decision. But when I was saying there before about disappointment with other people, often, and it can be something that I feel we do. We see people inherently as who they should be or who they are at a core level. And so sometimes when they're showing us a side of themselves that's not really there, there can be a disappointment that we feel from them. I don't know about other people, but I know from my experience it's come through a lot of that disappointment can be reflected from other people that we feel as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, you will.
I resonate with everything that's being said. And I've summarized it in my reality as my need for control or expectations, unmet needs or expectations that I think I have, that I perceive to have, or my attachment to something or someone. And when I can break it down, I think being a reflector has just caused me to get to the core root of everything so that I can more simplify things in my life and realize that, oh, the core root of this is this, and I see it and I can move beyond it more quickly and easily. But definitely that disappointment is definitely showing me I'm out of alignment. And I'm out of alignment with my core essence, my soul, my infinite nature, right? Like my wholeness, my completeness. And yeah, getting back in alignment easier now than it ever was in my earlier years. I'll be honest with that. It is a work in progress. I think even as we today are continually moving through the challenges in the world, it's the day after inauguration, and there are still people walking around with such discontent, dissatisfaction, anger, right, over yesterday and things that were said and done and decisions made. And I get it, but how long? Like suffering's optional.
Mm.
To me, that dissatisfaction was me suffering. And when I really realized suffering was optional, it was an inside job. I had to take radical responsibility of where I wanted to be and what my choices were.
Thank you so much.
I feel I feel like if I'm unable to be objective, then like if I'm feeling subjective or I'm feeling extremely attached to the environment, to the person, to the situation, then I'll take that as an indicator, like I was saying before. Like rather than trying to replace or reposition myself in a place where I can look at it objectively or actively try to dissociate myself rather than just allowing myself to be attached or not attached, then I just take it as that's not a good environment for me because the environment is evoking that for me in one way or another. Of course, I have the choice ultimately to remain there or not, but just I've learned, especially over these last 2 years, that when I'm feeling that rather than coming at myself like, oh no, I need to do something different or I need to think differently or I need to act differently or feel differently. I will say, okay, so this environment isn't conducive for me. It isn't helping me grow. It makes me feel like I'm out of alignment. But it doesn't I think ultimately I'm not out of alignment. I just being subjective. Ultimately that subjective experience will lead me back to the objectives. But when I'm there and I experience disappointment, I wholly agree with you, Jason. It's like this full body thing. And I think I've been able to I've been able to tie that disappointment to I think the other types transference as well, where I feel like I'll feel disappointment in the form of bitterness, or I'll feel it in the form of frustration, or I'll feel it in the form of all of those things. So of course that depends on the environment, but either way it goes, it does feel like this whole body just grossness. And it can last, it can linger if I don't know, if I can't, or if I'm not aware, or if I'm not considering how the environment is impacting me. And so when I get to that space, I actually know because again, I'm using it as an indicator. I know what I need to do or what I need to create in my environment to the best of my ability to get myself back in a refreshed, replenished face. For example, I know that if I'm feeling disappointment just like throughout the day, I'll go take another shower. I'll go wash the dishes. I'll go, organize something. For me, that works to kind of reset my equilibrium. Other times, like with my baby is 3.5, and she's a generator. I'm a single mother. This is a 24/7 thing. And so sometimes I have to go in a room, close the door, lock the door, and deal with the mess later. Like sometimes it's just, okay, I need to get back into my own energy. But I think it allows me to be more forgiving of disappointment and not take it so personally in a sense, like not take it as like, oh, I did too much again. It's just like, okay, now I need to remove myself from this environment, place myself in a different one, or do something different with my bodily environment or my physical environment. But Jason, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with how big disappointment can feel.
It's so interesting too, because, as a generator reading about reflectors and reading about disappointment, it is so cool to be able to hear your actual experience that in my head, disappointment, I couldn't even picture it feeling the way you're describing. And that's why I described it as heartbreak because, it just sounds like a full body, like, oh my gosh. Um, my next question was, does disappointment ever lead to shame for you or anyone? Anyone? Yeah, Annie?
That's my
Or
fun
Jason?
little generational karma. So I've got all sorts of a nice relationship with shame, evidently. So I worked with a human design hypnotherapist, Cressa. And when we were doing all this, we got to the root of what was making Jason tick, and it was shame. So I do think there is a connection, at least for me, between the disappointment and the shame. And sometimes it's as simple as just being ashamed that I was so attached to an idea, you know, and saying, why did I set myself up for this kind of a disappointment? But I think Annie spoke to something too of how sometimes we feel that disappointment in others and in environments. And that's really hard. I have to try to not attach to what I think a situation's going to be like or what a person's going to be like, because I don't want to put any of that on another person. Right. But I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes don't you just go full reflector? Like there's a lot of truths we don't tell. And I've learned that I have to ask people, do you want the whole thing or do you want me to like sugarcoat this? Like, how real do you want me to be in this reflecting? Because sometimes I've talked to people in the most brutally honest ways and they've gotten really quiet and they're like, damn, that was pretty intense. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, but you did ask for, you wanted my true assessment. And sometimes that goes into it sounds like disappointment, it sounds like shame, it sounds like some really intense things. And then I spend a lot of time trying to unpack what I just said to somebody. Was it right? What was I reading? Why did I say those things? So I think there's some discernment too, but I, I think there is a link between the disappointment and the shame, and at least in my experience.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I only brought that up because as a third line, our failures, like trying things, being disappointed when things don't work out or thinking that it's a failure. And I link it to feeling shame sometimes. And in order to decondition the third line, my third line self, it was like looking at my relationship to failure and shame. Like, oh, I'm a bad person because I, didn't live up to this standard or whatever. And so yeah, as you were speaking, it made me think about that. And maybe that's also like a human thing as whatever type, whatever profile line, right? Feeling that shame and how we get to that experience of shame for ourselves. That makes sense. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to add to that? Yeah, Brittany.
I mean, I can 100% resonate with everything that has been said here as well. But I think the other thing for me, when it comes to like the disappointment and then kind of that transition into shame is as as I was younger, as a kid and teenager, like I mean, I still have those people pleasing tendencies. It's hard to get rid of them entirely, but it's something that I've really been working on over the years. But when I was younger, like I prided myself on being a people pleaser and a peacekeeper in my family. And when things didn't go the way that I wanted to, or when things got rocky or uncomfortable or confrontation, whatever it was, I took that on as something that I did wrong. When really that wasn't my stuff, but I took on that role and that responsibility of making sure that everyone got along and that everybody was happy and that home life was smooth. And I'm also the oldest sibling in my family too. So there was this big responsibility, this big weight of making sure that like I took care of everyone and that I took care of everything. And I don't really know if that was something that was necessarily put on me by other people or that I took on myself or a combination of both. But when things went a different way than what I felt like they needed to go, then that would turn into not only disappointment but shame because then I put that on as myself as I did something wrong. I'm not good enough and stuff like that. So
Mm.
yeah.
A lot of internalizing, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Now, when you can't wait for the full lunar cycle, what do you do? What are some practical things you tune into? Can you share?
I don't I don't think for me it's I can't wait because oftentimes that period is met with certainty before the month is up.
Mm.
But when it's not, which is I think what you're
Yeah.
leading to, is I've given myself permission to say I don't have an answer yet. And if you need one, it must be no at this point for me. I can't commit, right? Like, but I give myself permission to be fully 100% transparent and vulnerable in the moment to my
Mm.
truth. I don't have an answer. Right now, I just met with somebody yesterday who wants me to create a chapter in their book. And while it resonates, I have a first quarter agenda that doesn't fit in writing a chapter. If he needs an answer today, I don't have one. I can't write them. Go on without me, right?
Mm.
But if he can wait, if when the answer comes to me, right? And that's really what it is all about when it comes to me, when I'm fully knowing with a certainty in my body. And I feel like this is opening us up to a lot of what's coming on board for all of humanity, more of our inner resources. And let's just call them our psychic abilities, the knowing, the sensing, the hearing, the voice of spirit, the voice of the living life force energy guiding us forward. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you for that. It's really, really interesting to hear how you can just surrender into that. Cool. I'm inspired. I should probably take a lesson from some of from the reflectors. And I've got sun in my face. It's really nice, but I know it doesn't look great on camera.
You look
Uh,
great.
oh, thank you.
I had a really experience with my authority that led me to understanding it as repetition rather than loader, like just needing the constant coming back around to it rather than a certain amount of time. Because like Donna said, it's more often than not before the month is up, I've
Mm.
had enough conversations, I've thought about it enough times. But one day, after having several conversations about like, well, what do you do if it's just a decision that you have to make in that day? I'd gone shopping, and it's a silly example, but it was so eye-opening for me, where I was deciding between these 2 bags, and for us, they were both gorgeous, and, I had my daughter there, and we were just shopping, and so I put both of them in the cart, and I just walked around the store, and as I put things in the cart, I looked at both of them time and time again, and time I went more toward one than the other. And so by the time I was done shopping, I put the other one back. It was easy. And so I realized that I had like that is the same thing that happens with everything. As long as I have the space to give myself, just like Don said, as long as I have the time to decide and to come to a decision, then it's just about letting it come to me over and over again. It oftentimes comes through like conversations with others. I connect with a lot of people day in and day out. So, those of us who are coaches or have done any form of like interrelational, like, we are like, touching all these people, but things come to me over and over and over again. And by the time it comes 3 or 4 times, I'm like, oh, I can tell where my body is. It's like my body's leaning more to one side than the other. And I think it's been really liberating because the lunar authority really felt like the idea of having to wait a month or having to wait a certain amount of time really present with me. I was just like, I don't always have that time. And like, what, especially having my kid, like, I don't get it. But now I can tell when things come up like minimally or as like seed version months ahead of time. And then so later on, when it comes time for me to make the decision, I'm like, I already know because this has been coming back to me over and over and over and over again. So I already know where my stance is on it. And it's been really nice because it makes me feel like I'm standing on solid ground constantly.
Oh, that is really cool. Really cool to help me understand and anyone else who wants to understand that waiting the lunar cycle. Now, I've heard as a suggestion, when you can't wait a lunar cycle, tuning into what option would bring a sense of surprise. What do you think about that?
Okay, I want to back this up on this lunar cycle stuff because it's very limiting. Okay, let's
Yeah, yeah.
remember when we're working with people and we're giving them decision making skills, all these other types get these really cool things, emotion and you know, bulimic, and you get this intuitive and this responding, and then we're just told the moon. Okay,
Yeah.
we use a fancy word lunar, but basically somebody just said make decisions per the moon. You're like, what's that supposed to mean, right? And then they're like, oh, it's 28 days. Oh, well, great. Do you just want to tie my hands behind my back here? And human design is not meant to do that, right? And
Mhm.
it's empowering and should be. And so one of the things my coach told me, he said, think of it as a period of time, like what Jocelyn is speaking to. You're not sitting there with a calendar checking the days off before you get to day 29 to finally do something. You tend to know, right? There's a period of time. I so my strategies are be a little predictive. If you know decisions are coming up, start sitting with them now. So by the time you're in that position and you make that instantaneous decision, you've probably already processed it long enough. You've done the 28 days and maybe plus
Mm.
mentally already. So that's one part of it. My other strategy is I taught my daughter who's a projector. And so I love projectors. I think they guide energy, including reflectors, incredibly well. So I've taught my daughter human design and she's a splenic authority. So I just call her up, I give her the two options and she knows almost instantly. And I act on that. So I don't give her access to everything in my life, but if
Mhm.
I am impressed, and you sometimes are when you're coaching and doing your own business, you can't wait 28 days. Sometimes you got to decide, are we going to market it this way or that way? And my daughter helps me make those decisions. I defer to her. She's been pretty right too. She's guided me very well. So that's been part of it too. And then I don't know. I think it's a
Yeah.
lot of what Jocelyn's saying, just giving yourself that time to sit with it. And then what you're saying about, doing the thing that creates the most surprise, I have used that strategy
Sure.
and it has gone pretty well for me. If I'm like, okay, what is the in the moment decision that seems to present the most surprise, the least possible thing that I could attach to? And that's helped too. But you will get yourself committed to things though without waiting it out. And I have done that too. So I mean, I can roll it backwards and be like, should have never volunteered for that particular thing. Should have never, you know, bought this object. I've made some in the moment decisions that I have definitely regretted. And I wish I would have slowed it down. And I think that's the key for all types. Human design is all about slowing this whole party down,
Yeah.
just giving yourself the time you need to experience life and to slow it down. Reflectors probably are asked to slow it down more than everyone else for a longer duration. But that's a great strategy for all of us in a rush world. Just take a minute and pause.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think that's why I have so many questions about the lunar cycle because, again, it's like it doesn't sound, when someone reads it, it's like, okay, but what does that mean? And what does that actually even look like? What are some practical strategies that you can tune into to not get yourself in disappointment a lot, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the what Jocelyn was saying about the patterning, and she's noticed that patterning because that essentially is our lunar cycle. That is you know, us mapping around the wheel of noticing our own patterning. So coming into that, when you can't make a decision after a while, you do know your own patterning. You do know when this is going to sort of like light you up or bring surprise and delight because it's sort of coming. So even if you can't wait the full lunar cycle or the full 28 days, there's still a moment of pausing and waiting, going into environments where maybe you're going to get a hookup with the harmonic gate that you've got that's really, resonant in your chart. Again, it's initiating that patterning in you. So these are ways that I love. I just love what Jocelyn was saying there about it's just the pattern that she has. And I'm like, that's exactly what it feels like. But it is, yeah, it's we can kind of get those kind of like moments and fluidity flowing through us to get that surprise and delight or aha moments from just being around others, as Jason does with his daughter, and having that trusted confidant to be able to soundboard out with, write down, use the senses of our own bodies, sight, sound, smell, to be able to kind of bring us into active awareness. I think that's when good decisions can be made, when we're actively aware of what's happening, opposed to riding along the flow of what somebody else wants us to do, or maybe riding their high or riding their low. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you for that. What tools or practices help you stay aligned and grounded while you navigate your openness?
I swim a
Mm.
lot.
Mhm.
I need to connection with like physical things. So water, oceans, again, just so if I have a shower, if I'm feeling I need to ground a lot. And I found, interestingly, that I have most activations. So does Jason, we've got nearly identical charts. The We've got most activations in my throat, but I don't have very many in the lower half, like in my root. So really using like those kind of grounding aspects of, you know, more physical body things can really kind of ground me out of here, because I want to be more top heavy. It's not like for everybody, but I found that things like that really help
Mm.
kind of bring me back into the real space and time, opposed to kind of getting caught up in the airiness of it all, or getting caught in my mind. I have inner vision, so of course I'm going to go naturally in here. But yeah, bringing myself into a physical awareness can kind of ground me back into reality.
Mm. Yeah. Anyone else?
That's absolutely
I
bananas. Like Annie and I could have just said what she said. My connection with water and how like much it grounds me. And she's right. If we threw our charts up, I think we only differ in a single gate. And it's pretty insane. So it's interesting that she finds grounding the exact same way I do. So I lived in a community that had a river. I would go there daily. I would meditate by the river. And then I moved out of that community, and I've had a hard time finding a similar place that gives me the same experience. The desert and the rocks and the like wooded areas just aren't doing it for me. So I actually drive 20 minutes over to this town that has the river still, just so I can feel that grounding. When I don't have access to that, I've found swimming 100% can get me very grounded fast, and then showers, which is
Mm.
just, it's wild, Annie, how similar that is. Like our charts, respond the same way to the same grounding techniques. So now I'm curious if the rest of you find the same power in water, or if you find a different connection in nature that helps you feel grounded.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely grounding myself in nature is when I feel like I'm kind of getting like lost. Nature is a big one for me, feet on the ground, being in the grass, water for sure when I feel like I need a good cleansing. Going for a walk or a hike unplugged is a big one that I know that I need when I need to kind of disconnect. um, Breath work, meditation, huge for me as well. It lets me like come back to my body and kind of call my energy back, and just because I notice that when I dissociate, then like I need to breathe. And so breath work and meditation are really huge for me as well. But yes, same thing with like a bath or a shower. Like when I feel like really kind of like weighed down or like stuck in a sense, that is really helpful to kind of like cleanse my energy and just like wash everything off in a sense. And the other thing that I try to like give myself grace with is like when I'm really feeling the emotions, is like to let myself like ride the wave in a sense. Like if I'm feeling really excited or really angry about something, like I know that like, okay, I'm gonna get through it. But right now, like this is just where I am. But once I get through it, then it'll help clear my mind a little bit. And then it'll be easier to make that to know what I feel about making this decision. And so giving myself the time to kind of like move through that, because I am in a house of, a lot of generator and manifesting generator energy. So they don't understand like the time and the space that I need. And I don't understand how they just want to, they're just like, go, go, go. Like they want it. It's just different. So like trying to find a balance with that energy in my household too is, it's very challenging, but yeah, the grounding is definitely, like, the biggest thing for me, I think.
Mm. Thank you. Donna, did you have anything?
I think sometimes, and I'm only relating this because I had family in town over the holidays, and my kids decided to come in one right after another with hardly any break for me, and it was staying in my house as well. So it was like sharing my space, and when you're used to your own space and your own energy, and coming back home to that, you rely on it. And when it's not here, it's it's an adjustment, and I found that the normal things I normally did, my normal activities, working out, pickleball, I was dropping those to spend time with my kids and do things collectively. And so I wasn't getting the full on habits and patterns of my normal life that ground me and bring me back in. And I too lack a lot of definition in, obviously I have no definition, but no gates in my lower portion. I mean, I have like three centers in the lower quadrant that are completely empty of active gates, which doesn't mean I don't have the energies to them, like, right? But they're not my gifts. So I have to kind of work at being grounded and rooted. And I felt like during that time, I just was able to give focus to it in the moment and bring it as so, which is something I've never achieved up until now. So I do think that our practices are ever evolving. I know that for me, meditation, breath work, all those things have evolved over time. And my whole purpose in meditation has changed, and what I meditate for, and how much of it's still in quiet and open and receptive, and how much of it is alignment for the energy I need to move into in my next activity. So I do think that this question is a really powerful one because I think that over time we're learning new modes and models of what it looks like for us to adapt. And we aren't limited that it has to look just one way. Our ability to come back home to our center is as easy as we think it is, as we believe it to be, right? And just because someone else needs to do it this way doesn't mean that's the best way for you.
Mhm.
And, I found myself having to wrestle with this over those multiple weeks. While it was great having my son in town for my birthday, I missed playing with my friends. I missed hanging out with my friends over my birthday. I love celebrating my birthday. And yes, I love celebrating it with my kids, and I was richly fulfilled. But I didn't get to celebrate with my friends. Right. And realizing I need to be grounded here. This is a lot of energy. I'm just feeling all of them. Like, I get
Mhm.
my grandkids on Wednesday, and my granddaughter has every single center defined. And when I say she lights me up, I know this room full of reflectors knows exactly what that means. Like, energetically, mm, is grandma, right? Like, she lights me up. She's a manifesting generator. She's full of energy, and every center is fully defined in her. And I have no idea what that feels like, except that I'm so lit up. There's a part of me that can't wait till tonight when she goes home and I can come back to just me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense.
No, thank you so much for all of that.
Mm.
Yeah, Jocelyn.
I'd like to piggyback off of something she said in regards to, that grounding and coming home to self doesn't have to look like anything in particular. I really truly resonate with that because rather than specific things, although showering is one of those things across the board that, like, if I have to take 3 to 4 showers a day, I will, because it gives me that like sense of safety and just like seclusion that I really need. But I rely on certain characteristics, like rather than having to do something specific, I know that I need to go get curious. I need to be inspired. I need to go experiment. I need to do something physical. So there's like kind of these umbrella things that I know I need to do in certain situations. Once something's been indicated to me, I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I need to be curious about something, or I need to go experiment with the craft or with a person, or I need to, something like that. And it allowed me kind of that freedom to not just do whatever, but if I'm in an environment that's severely limiting to me, which I have been for the past 2 years, I can find something. It opens up, like it unlocks a masterful resourcefulness in me where no matter what circumstance, environment, or whatever, I can do something within that characteristic, if that makes sense. So I appreciate you for saying that, because that's exactly what it is for me, is that, it really allows a full range for me. And I need that, especially in these last couple of years.
Thank you for that. I feel like I said, I'm learning so much. This conversation is going to be so amazing for anyone who tunes in. Last question. What is a piece of advice you have for a reflector embarking on their deconditioning journey?
Beautiful question. I think it's the words of wisdom I would give myself, and that is, first of all, we all have a core wound that we come into the world with. And until we really know it's a core wound and that we're going to experience it, it's going to show up, we tend to take it personally and we tend to suffer in regards to it. My core wound is rejection. And I realized that that's what I came here to heal. Thank you for showing me again how powerful I am to embrace rejection, not take it personally, but to see both sides of it and to really allow that energy. I feel like Gene Keys did a really good job of allowing us to see both the shadow and the city, this extreme sacred gift in that energy, and that it's the same energy, just addressed from different perspectives, whether misused, abused, used improperly. And to see that rejection as a way to bring me back home to me. So, whatever it is for you that causes you that discontent, that suffering in life, that taking something personal upon yourself and then beating yourself up over it, to really realize that's your gift and to fully embrace it.
Mhm.
And it's looking to be integrated. I feel like my early part of life was cutting things out. And what I've realized is it's not about cutting them out, it's about integrating them in, bringing them in and accepting them, loving that part of me, and realizing it's what I came here for. And in realizing it, it helps me not let other people feel rejected. It helps me create a bigger sense of belonging and acceptance in the communities I serve, and so on and so forth. So it would really be to look at what your biggest resistance is, your biggest pain in life, and to take the time, make a date with it, sit with it, go deep into it at the core, at the root of what it's trying to show you. And it's really asking us to give ourselves what we're missing.
Beautiful. Thank you, Donna.
I would, I have a reflective client that I'm working with right now. And one of the biggest conversations that we have is, or that we've had, is in regard to how people perceive him. I know for me, others' perception of me has been a big deal for me, because I've wanted to be um, acknowledged and engaged and respected as, like, as me. And it took me a long time to understand that not everyone can or is supposed to see me, all of me. They experience the parts of me that they need to experience, and that's that. So, like, on one hand, allowing that to be okay and allowing that to be the experience and not needing to mold that experience into something else, so that you can allow yourself to enjoy however it is they're experiencing you. If you're, you know, dealing with them frequently or for a long time. But on the other hand, understanding that the people who ultimately are going to be close closest to you, the people who will ultimately know the most of you, they're going to have to be with you over time in many different environments. Because it's like, in order to know who we are, you've got to see the core pieces that are present in all of those environments over all that time, throughout all those transits, around all these people. The closest relationships I've ever had, there's one in particular that I think of. We were like roommates and we were like siblings and we were like lovers and we were best friends. And it wasn't because we didn't have any time apart, but it was because not only did we live with each other, we went to each other's like social events. We sometimes worked with each other. We would go do leisurely fun things together. There were so many things that we did together that she was able to see, and I could feel that she could see me, and she was experiencing me and not just her in these different environments. So I think that would be the biggest thing for me is like, I heard a quote from, or I heard a lecture from Alan Watts at some point, and he talks about how life is a show. And he talks about all the roles that you can take in that show as an audience member or as the actor or as the director or as a stagehand. And I feel like as reflectors, we're able to take on all of those roles. I often feel like I'm taking all of those roles at once. So I told that client, and I would tell any reflector to like, you know, I would tell them about those roles and tell them to really enjoy those roles and recognize that if someone is going to be close to them, they need to see them in all those roles. Because one or two or just a couple and not all of them is not going to be enough for you to be seen. Otherwise, they're just there to experience the part of you that they can't see.
Mm, I love that. Anyone else?
Yeah. I
Yeah, yeah.
remember. Yeah, I think in order to decondition, you have to see where the conditioning is. And I think I would tell a reflector to just start asking yourself these questions. Why do you do what you do? Why do you think the way you do? Who told you to do this? Like, what script are you following? I think the other thing too with human design, I always said I never wanted to switch dogma for dogma. I didn't step out of a dogma so I could just bring another one back on. And unfortunately, in the human design space, sometimes we see that there's gatekeeping and there's people that say it's this and it's that. There's a Zen proverb. It's like, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. So let's not hang too closely to any of this. Take it for what it is, take what works, but constantly ask yourself, why do I think the way I do? Who told me to think this way? And I think that's been part of my deconditioning, is to just constantly recognize where I've been conditioned.
Mhm.
I think that rings true for a lot of new reflectors, because suddenly you see the openness. Well, it reasons then the openness has been bringing things in. Now it's time to start saying, where have I been pulling other people's program? I mean, at least for me. And I think that's why the focus of my coaching is all about life purpose. And as I've gone out and about, that left angle cross of distraction is pretty fun. I can be a great time at a karaoke or at a party and, I'll entertain. But sometimes if you want to get real, I can ask questions that will keep you up at night because you're wondering if you're following your right life path. And, as I work with people, it's really just stripping away everything. Mom and dad told me to do this. Society told me to do that. Church told me to do this. And as you take all that out, that's when you start to find yourself.
Mm, I'd love to echo that. That's exactly it. Take your time, really slow it down and ask yourself those small questions. Again, echoing what Jason said, even asking yourself sometimes, do I actually like this food that I'm eating? These small things add up to big things of just you starting to get to know who you are. But I also would like to say to new reflectors or anybody sort of discovering more themselves is you don't have to have all the answers right away, you know, because the real wisdom comes from that observing and reflecting. So, just starting to notice the people that you are around and how those environments feel. That's a really, really simple, small step that I think can really bring that trust that you want to gain as you start to go through this process, starting to trust and go, oh, I don't actually feel good here. And there might have been a little nudge that you'd had in the past, but you didn't, oh, no, no. Whereas now you can sort of start listening to those subtle whispers or whatever they are that just sort of says, oh, this is not feeling good. So the more you kind of lean into that and start trusting it, the more it kind of grows and the more you become more confident in, trusting the environments, people, places, and decisions that you're making. So, but you don't have to know it all at once. And we all want it, though. We all want the answers right now, but it just takes a bit of time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Brittany, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think I'm still relatively new on this human design journey. And so, at least for me in the beginning, learning that I was a reflector, even though it was something that like I knew, it was also really overwhelming and to like try and understand this piece or this aspect of me as who I am and how I show up in the world and move through the world. So I think a big piece of advice that I'd like to give is just to give yourself grace, to have patience with yourself, and to know that like at the end of the day, this is your journey and your journey alone. And everybody else is on their own journey. And I feel like I've gotten lost in other people's lives and journeys and instead of like focusing on me and myself. And also learning that this power that we have, the superpower that we have as reflectors is the sensitivity is really a superpower and not a weakness. And for so long I saw it as a weakness. And now trying to view it as a strength has been really life changing for me. And so I think if anything, like start to see your sensitivity as a strength and just that you're capable of so much more than you realize. You just have to see it in yourself. Doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks or feels. This is your journey at the end of the day.
Mm, I love that. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in and to all the reflectors here having this conversation with me. I learned so much just hearing your inside experience of what it's like to be a reflector. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaz.